weren't even worried about it all. You know, I was just, he said, I just wasn't sure about preaching this.
I think he was afraid that he was going to feel like he was preaching at people.
Well, maybe he needs to be preaching at people.
Well, yeah, that's right.
And I told him, I said, God said a lot of things to me today through you.
He did a good job.
And a lot of what I get said in the Sunday school came through with that to me, you know, when he was preaching this morning.
I thought about that.
Yeah, a lot of that.
The conversation we had in Sunday school.
Was so much, you know, what God's been trying to tell me to do, you know, it's just, I don't know, it's just, he's just young right now, but he can preach the word, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, he did a good job.
He's got a gift of that.
Yeah.
God's given him that gift, but yeah, he's gonna find out how hard it is.
Takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, it is. It is. So are they even coming back?
I don't think they're coming back.
Oh, okay.
Shelby said that he was wrung out. She used my words.
Yeah.
And I was waiting on Caritha, but we'll go ahead and start our conversation, and maybe she'll get here. She said she was coming. And
I hope something happened with her dad.
oh, I thought I heard somebody.
Yeah, that's somebody, I think.
So we're finally, after I don't know how many months we've been doing this, there she is.
Hey, girl.
Maybe I have to read y'all. I've been so tired. I have not been this tired. I can tell you the last time I've been this tired. My son and future daughter-in-law decided to stay out till 12 o'clock, which was making Roger Kelly so mad. And then when they got home, which praise God, it was a good thing because they were with my granddaughter. Supposedly setting some things straight. Which to me was just another good thing because I was thinking, okay, Lord, I'm just having flashbacks. She wanted to talk till 4:30 this morning. And I'm like, okay, I can't go to sleep and be at church. So y'all, I have not slept since Friday or Saturday. And then today I'm telling Roger, please let me take a nap, please let me take. So what does he do? He's going in and out the house. He's throwing all this and talking to me. I'm just like, okay, Lord, I can't even take it.
Well, I appreciate your faithfulness. I know it's hard sometimes.
But you know, this is the place I come where there's peace and there's joy. I mean, not that they're not all having a good time, but it centers me, and I come hear God's word, and I'm like, thank you, Lord, for my church family.
Well, it was nice to see him this morning. That was a surprise.
And the fact that at 4:30 she went in there to go to sleep, and I thought, well, we're not going to be going to 8 o'clock church. And of course, I'm starting to stir going to get Roger up because, you know, I have bulletins, I have payroll, I'm going to 8 o'clock church. And she's, boom, up out of that bed, and she's getting the kids together, and we're all coming. And I thought, well, I am impressed.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I am impressed. So, here is some, if y'all want any of these or not, a few tomatoes. He picked them yesterday. Something's going on with his tomatoes, and so he's not letting them stay quite as long on the vine, so they have to ripen in the window.
Oh,
because something's happening. But do y'all do cucumbers and tomatoes? They're coming out. They're coming out.
I won't eat all those, but I'll take a few.
Here, take what you want, or put on the table what you don't want. Maybe that way you'll have the bag.
Oh my goodness.
I'll go get me a bag. And Darlene had cucumber. I got the other day at the cruise ship, so I got a cucumber from her.
And right now, these little ones fresh, they're okay, but much longer they're gonna start getting bitter and not gonna be as good. And all this heat, you know. I'm so sorry. I had this morning, and I saw you.
All right.
And then I went, when I saw your text, I went, oh, you dodo brain. To see, Harris doesn't want me to pay him till Mondays.
That's what he told me.
Yeah, he don't want me dealing with it.
When I found out you'd given Madison hers, I said, well, I'll get mine later then. I know it's taken care of.
Yeah, and it's just they were all, like I said, I was sleep deprived. And they were all ready to head out the door.
Well, it was good that you see them.
Yes, it is. That has been
all right. Well, we're in chapter 18. And boy, 18 and 19, you almost got to do together because there's so much going on. But if we don't, we don't. We're not in any big hurry, are we? obviously we're not. We've been doing Genesis for how long?
6 months.
And we're only in chapter 18. But I have really enjoyed this so far. I like doing this.
I have too. It's
I
been
have.
interesting. And it's been, some of it's been in experiencing God.
Yeah,
So I've loved
yeah.
that too.
That's been cool.
Yeah, the currents have been overlapping some
Yes.
in all of this, so that's good too. So this, everybody knows this story that's read the Bible of the 3 visitors appearing to Abraham, one being the Lord, and so it's believed that it's a theophany of Christ coming and declaring his intentions. And there's a section in here kind of in the middle of 18 that really caught my attention that I talked about some in Sunday school this morning. And then, of course, the 2 chapters together form a unit that provides us with a lot of contrast of what is happening with and without God, righteousness, what's not righteous, mercy, and how that works into the whole system of things with God, and how once we kind of get established in one way of living, it does really take a miracle to change us. And Lot helps teach us that lesson, and his daughters, unfortunately. And we begin to see, even in that episode, how God is going to bring about, salvation. And salvation's more than just fixing things. It truly is an opportunity to be new. So, chapter 1 says, the Lord appeared to Abraham at the Oaks of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance of his tent during the heat of the day. So this is a high noon event. Some commentators will try to suggest that because it's the heat of the day that he's in some sort of trance because it's so hot. But there's no biblical inclination for that at all. You wouldn't be doing anything else but sitting under your tent in the heat of the day.
Which is what we're doing in our houses.
That's right, because it is hot, not just in the heat of the day, all day.
Oh, gosh.
So he looked up and he saw 3 men standing near him as though they just appeared. But he finds them there. They've moved into his space. And when he saw them, there's a series of verbs here that we have to really pay attention to. It says he ran. And we find ran and hurried and quickly all through this passage. He ran from the entrance of the tent to meet them, and he bowed to the ground. We've seen Abraham bow to the ground already, but only when he's speaking to God. And so his bowing to the ground is the red flag, the sign for the reader that this is a godly visitor, if nothing else, but even God himself. And said, my Lord, if I found favor with you, which was a common phraseology to say, if I'm worth anything to you, blank, whatever follows. In this case, do not pass me by. Do not pass by your servant. So he says, let a little water be brought that you may wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. So the first sign of hospitality here is refreshment. Washing your feet was the ultimate of refreshment. I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother, the old place across the road had been built by her family in the 1840s probably. And she had built a new house, her and her husband, in the early 20th century. And they rented the house to a black family that was there. And they plowed with mules and the whole deal. But I can remember as a kid, I would go across the road when we would go visit. And at the end of the day, they all had their own foot tub. And they would go draw water out of the well. They didn't have running water, had a well. You had to put the bucket down. And they poured those, and they would sit there with their feet soaking in that cool water. And they went from dead tired to energized just from having their, yeah. And I always think of that when I read these.
So you have a personal visual. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can see it. I can see
So
it
they
just
got
as
up
plain
big
as
more
day.
after that.
Oh yeah, they had peas to snap, and they had,
That was just
that was just
round one.
yeah. So anyway, so that's what he does. He goes and gets a little water, washes their feet, And he says, rest under the tree. And he says, I will bring a bit of bread so that you may strengthen yourselves. So he's offering these very modest amounts. See, he's waiting to see. This was a common thing. He's waiting to see what the visitors might demand.
Friend or foe, huh?
Yeah. So you offer a minimum, and then you wait to see if just what their response is going to be. And of course, their response is, yeah, do what you said you're going to do. So they're willing to accept his meager hospitality. But then we look the next passage, and everything's not meager, it's extravagant. So Abram hurried. He ran, now he's hurrying to the tent, and he said to Sarah, quick, knead 3 measures of fine flour and make bread. So she's making not just a little bit of bread, she's making a loaf for each one of them. Abram ran to the herd and got a tender choice calf. He gave it to a young man who hurried to prepare it. Then Abraham took curds and milk, as well as the calf that he had prepared, and set them before the men. He served them, and they ate under the tree. So when it starts out, it's like, you're here. Let me do this very quick thing for you so you can refresh yourself and be on your way. But proper hospitality is extravagant, and you don't cook a calf in a hurry. So they've been there now. So it's like they're at home. This is a way of saying that you're my kinsman by offering this kind of hospitality, which is exactly where God has been leading Abraham this whole time. And I got to thinking about this today. I looked for writing on it somewhere to kind of, give some backbone to what I was observing. But when God first speaks to Abraham in chapter 12, he just speaks to him. I've called you out of the, Ur of Chaldea. Go and be a blessing, basically. And Abraham doesn't say anything. He just goes. He's not the blessing yet. All he's done so far, really, in frame of the first thing, is to just go. And then as we look through, and every time that he has an encounter with God, the intimacy of the relationship is deepened in some sense, where there's a promise of a child, and he responds to that. Then there's he reiterates the covenant, and Abram says, wait a minute, you keep talking about this, but I don't have an heir. And so they do the covenant of the animal, and then it goes through that whole episode, and it comes up again, and he makes a promise again. Then he gives him a sign to wear on his body as to this covenant. Okay, and all of this has been a progression. The conversation has become deeper. The connection with the physical marking of circumcision has sealed it. And we're finally to this place where Abram's actually now, instead of God being the provider of everything that's been going on in the relationship, this is the first time Abraham's been able to offer back. And I just thought that was over the, how many chapters? 6 chapters.
18,
yeah, it's a beautiful way of us being able to see that our relationship with God is not a thing that just blossoms overnight. This has taken some time, 20 years.
Yeah, because how many years has passed in those 6 chapters?
Yeah. And we get in a hurry sometime, thinking that, man, I want this kind of...
It's the American way. We're microwave and instant.
Yeah.
And if we don't get satisfied, then everything's broken and wrong and we move on.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just felt good to finally see this, that Abram's offering him everything that he can that's the best. It's the finest flour. It's a young calf. Curds and milk were, that was the delicacy of the day. If you had a sweet tooth, curds were that. I can't imagine it, but ugh.
Must have been the mixture with the something,
Oh, no. I've heard people talk about eating curds, but I can't even make myself hardly say it, much less eat it. It's got a curd. It's like a cud. Who wants a curd?
Out of the milk?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
I always think of it as cottage cheese.
It's that same consistency and
I love
yeah.
cottage cheese.
See, and
That's where my mind's going, cottage cheese and pineapples or cottage cheese and pears.
Yeah. Maybe that's what they did with it. They took curds and mixed some fruit in it or something.
So, verse 9, where's your wife Sarah? Now, the last time we've heard from Sarah, she was being very ugly. Okay, and the last time we've heard anything from God about Sarah is when Abraham says, "Oh, if only Ishmael was acceptable in your sight." He says this to God, and God basically says, "I'm having none of it." Sarah is going to be the mother. Okay, so without Sarah being there, and without a lot being said, God reiterates the promise that He's made to Sarah too.
I said it, it's still going to happen.
That's right. As ugly as she has been.
It's still
Okay.
gonna happen.
All she's done.
Yeah, I'm standing by my woman, so to speak. So he says, "Where's Sarah?" There, it says, "There in the tent." And the Lord said, "I will certainly come back to you in about a year's time, and your wife Sarah will have a son." And my translation has an exclamation point behind that, meaning that this whole phrase is one that God is speaking in a way that is emphatic and unchanging. It's exclamatory. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent behind him, the God, the Lord. So this is kind of the scene. They moved inside the tent. They were eating, and they were enjoying a time after the meal. And Sarah had moved her way around and gotten to the backside. So she was from the outside looking in, okay? And she was listening. So
She's being a woman.
I wasn't going to say it.
Oh, I understand, because that's what I would have done.
We know everything that's going on around us.
Yeah.
You may think we don't, but we're very aware.
So the writer reminds us that they're both getting old. And Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. No duh, been passed since we met her.
Maybe the first time.
Yeah. So she laughed to herself. "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I have delight? Will this be the great satisfaction of my life finally?" And she laughed. She doesn't take him serious. Okay.
But was she really around? I don't think she was around, was she, when he first said this promise and all? I'm sure Abraham told her about it.
Yeah, no, all of this has
She
been
wasn't
promised
actually
to Sarah, but
hearing from him.
that's right. But Abraham's been the progenitor of it. He is holding on to it for her. And God has repeatedly now made it possible for that promise to come to fruition. And so here we have this great impossibility, someone to have children that can't have children. It is as out of touch with reality as a man born blind being made to see. Okay, so we see some parallels here in those two stories. We look at the impossible nature of things and we think it can't happen. Not even in God's cosmos can it happen. Well, we begin to find out that it can happen. The reader knows, of course.
God is control of the cosmos.
Yeah.
He is the cosmos.
Yeah, he is the cosmos. There's no escaping what he wants. Okay, so she says, but the Lord answered and says, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Can I really have a baby when I'm old? Is anything impossible for the Lord?'" What did Jesus say?
There's nothing to
Yeah, all things are possible.
Nothing's impossible.
Okay, so he's quoting himself when he says that in the New Testament. Okay, "At the appointed time, I will come back to you. In about a year, she will have a son." So Sarah denied it. "I did not laugh." I can just hear her now.
Yeah,
I did not
so
laugh.
that's it. I didn't laugh.
Yeah, I didn't laugh. She said because she was afraid. Man, we got to pay attention to all this language when we get to Lot in that whole situation. But he replied, "No, you did laugh." So what's that verse 15 is really important, because she is so desperately wanting to prove him wrong. That's all that this is about. I didn't laugh. So if you can't convince me that I didn't, if you're not convinced that I didn't laugh, if I'm able to convince you that I didn't laugh, then I am also able to believe that you will not follow through on what you just said. But he says, no, you did laugh, meaning I do know it. And there's nothing that I can't know, and there's nothing that I can't.
Yeah, you ought to figure this out by now. How did I know you laughed if you were only laughing to yourself?
Yes.
Yeah, you know, it's
Yeah.
like, I think
Yeah,
I
see,
would,
that's a
I would
scary
be like,
thing,
I would
isn't
be
it?
like falling out if somebody walked in and repeated something they just heard me thinking. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Oh,
who is
yeah.
this?
Oh, I
Yeah.
would run, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he established, God, the Lord, I should just say the Lord, establishes himself in the house of Abraham and Sarah, and he's come with an impossible promise, of which everything that God has promised and everything that God intends to bring about comes through that promise. And here is a very important part of that we're going to look at here in this next section. It says, so the men got up from there and looked out over Sodom. So I get this picture that they're up on this hill where the oaks of Mamre are, and they're able to see out over the plains, and in some distance they're able to see Sodom. And Abraham was walking with them to see them off. Then the Lord said, and I'm assuming it doesn't say he says it to himself, but he may be speaking to the other two.
Well, I was going to say there's three of them there, and is
Yeah.
that supposed to be representative of God the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit?
It can be, because there's three, and
And-
there's
and-
nothing to
and
say
that's-
it's not.
But they're talking like they're God. Shall I hide from Abraham when I'm about to
Yeah.
do? I mean, like, okay, guys,
Yeah.
you were there when we created. You know,
Right.
they were hovering, and let us make this.
Yeah.
I just,
Now
So it very
he's
well
got
could be.
some
yeah.
high-ranking angels with him, and he just kind of wants to hear their opinion.
Yeah, because we know they existed too,
Yeah,
and they
did
would
at
come
that
and go.
point, Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but we don't have to make it the Trinity in order for it to work.
Well, no, it works,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
just interesting to me that it's the three.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, me too. But I don't want to overstate it,
Right.
because it says, but then the Lord said, should I hide what I am about to do from Abraham? So this is a singular decision that is going to be carried out by two others. Okay? Should I hide what I'm about to do from Abraham? And then this is the reason why he's asking the question. Verse 18 and 19. Abraham is to become a great and powerful nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will command his children and his house after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. This is how the Lord will fulfill to Abraham what he promised him. So this is a huge thing. He says, so should I reveal to him? All right, yes, I should, because I've called Abraham. I've called him to become a great and powerful nation, and all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed through him. So we see here that he's talking about doing what is right and just. The nations are not going to know what is right and just until it is revealed to them by Abraham and his relationship to God. So it's important to the grand scheme of things that God has put forth that Abraham know what is happening, so that he can in the future be able to bless the nations with this understanding of what is right and just. So God is working out of his rightness and his justice in this event with Sodom, or the cities in the plain, Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, and then the other reason why he says, for I have chosen him so that he will command his children. How can he teach his children? And how can they carry on this sense of what is right and just? Okay, if if he doesn't have the full picture, if he can't realize and understand everything that I'm doing here. So God is more than willing to share with him what is about to happen, as bad as it is, because it's going to be useful to Abraham as he becomes a blessing to the nations, and as he is bringing up, so to speak, his children, so that they can know the God in the same way. So it's interesting here that he mentions specifically what is right and just, because when we get to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, we see rightness and justice, but we also get a clear glimpse at mercy, because there's no reason for Lot to be rescued other than the rightness and justice that God has already declared to his uncle.
And how that city is living is not right and just, and he's going to punish it.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, mercy comes out of it. But aren't we on that side? I mean, we're on the other side now. That's where my mind is just fast forward speeding. Are we living right and just so that we don't have to? Are we going to teach our children?
That's right.
You know, and are we living right and just even now? We're on the other side of the cross.
Yeah.
You know, we have Jesus, but it's.
Well, we're going to see when we get down here. We're gonna our minds are gonna explode when we get there.
I'm already a step ahead.
Yeah, I mean, because it just lather, rinse, repeat when we begin to look at this. And so when we do, we really begin to value the mercy of God more than ever. And not just for who is right. Yeah. Because we find here, I don't want to get too fast. Okay. This is how the Lord will fulfill Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is immense, and their sin is extremely serious. All right, where's the outcry coming from? We don't know. Is this the heavens? Is this the council in heaven that has just had enough of the sinfulness against God and they're crying out to God? Is it others?
Yeah, how many people are living in that like we are today? That's what I'm talking
about.
Yeah,
I know we can't escape
we can't get away
bringing the two together.
Yeah. You know, how many people?
How do his children get out of this mess that we're all surrounded by?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
yeah.
It's all.
I mean, we know how this story goes with just Lot and his wife, but how many? Were there other people there that maybe?
When you begin to think about the story, Abraham's already rescued them. He went over 100 miles north to rescue them from the invading kings and brought them back. So he's not unfamiliar with these people. He knows their sin. He has to know because he witnessed it. You can't unknow those things.
He's still looking out for family.
He's still looking out for family.
He's still looking out for family.
And there's also a sense here. He knows that there's good people.
That's the reason the next few verses.
And maybe that outcry is coming from
maybe
some
those
of the
people.
good people that have gone.
That's
you know, that have been healed because of the sinfulness in the Sodom and Gomorrah, and I mean, it does tell us that in heaven there are people crying out, "Why are you not avenging us?
Our blood.
Yeah,
right.
Avenging our blood. Why have you not done that yet?" You know, they're all in white and everything.
Yeah.
It describes.
Yeah, they're under the altar.
Yeah, they're saved. Yeah, they're safe. You know, safe, but they're still waiting for the final day.
Yeah. So he says, I will go down to see if what they have done justifies the cry that has come up to me. If not, I will find out. So we obviously know that God knows, right?
Yeah, right.
Otherwise, he wouldn't be God, and we could end the story right here. But what is the significance of I will go down and see?
He wants to be in relationship with them too.
Yes.
He wants them to know I love you too.
That's right.
Yeah.
So any other God in this period of time, if it's recorded that these cries of sinfulness have gone up against them, a threat of destruction would come down, and you would have to appease that God in order to relent that destruction. Here we have a God that comes down. And he says, let me see for myself. I must satisfy my own sense of what is right by being there, by witnessing, by experiencing.
Emmanuel.
Yeah. And so he comes and he does witness and he does experience. Okay? So he says, if it's not true, I'll find out, and all this would have been for nothing. The men turned from there and went towards Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before the Lord.
So 2 left and 1 still standing in the Lord's right.
Yes, because they're called the men, but the one that he's been speaking to
He's
has
called
been
the
called the
Lord.
Lord. Yeah. So there's some discussion about who they are. Most people settle on the idea that they're angelic beings that appear to be men, and so they're understood to be men. But without, complicating the point, they're there with God, and God has sent them on a purpose, and they're well equipped to deal with anything that comes up.
Yeah, I always thought that part of it was the angels.
Yeah.
It's like, how else do they
Right.
off all them crazy people?
But he can empower any of us to do what we're called to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he can.
Yeah. You got to remember, Enoch's already with him. Maybe one of them's Enoch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Abraham.
and David killed his tens of thousands. So.
Yeah.
When God was with him, the Bible will be
So Abraham stepped forward and said, "Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" Now this is now a problem. Abraham has reached a crisis of belief. Now he's with God, and he's made him a part of the family, hospitality, the whole deal. This is a solid, intimate relationship they have, and now there's something about this that he really can't understand. Are the righteous not protected from the wickedness and the destruction of those? Okay, so you sweep away? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you sweep it away instead of sparing the place for the sake of 50 righteous people who are in it? Good question. How much sinfulness is God willing to put up to preserve the righteous? Now we're getting to where you are, see? What is God willing to do to preserve us, to save our lives? Well, when they talk about death here, it's the death of everything. All right? On this side of the cross, when we talk about death, it's the death of our soul. And so we know what God was willing to do to save even the one righteous, the one which none of us are righteous, but we're made righteous. So anyway, don't want to get too clouded in that. He says, you could not possibly do such a thing. Because how does he say that? He has experienced the character of God in his own life. If you were not a merciful God, I wouldn't be here. So I've got to understand this. To kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike, he knows that this isn't the way that God does things. You could not possibly do that. Here's the second emphatic. Won't the judge, capital J, do what is just? Okay, got to remember that word judge. But yeah, won't the judge of the whole earth do what is just? A judge is just. The Lord said, if I find 50 in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. So now we know the worth of a righteous one. He will spare the whole place for the life of a righteous. Then Abram answered, since I have ventured to speak to my Lord, even though I am dust and ashes, suppose the 50 lack 5. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? I will not destroy if I find 45. Suppose 40. I will not do it on account of 40.
Abraham's in conversation, John, but he knows there's nobody down there that's righteous.
Yeah. He said, don't get angry with me, but I've got one more to
Yeah. I was stretching there, Lord. At 50.
Yeah, but suppose there's 30.
Yeah.
I will not do it for 30.
Come
See,
on.
this is God's providential knowledge in saying, Abram, I'm willing for you to ask these questions, and I'm willing for you to understand that I am going to be merciful to the nth degree, but there has to be something merciful for. Jesus guarantees that for us. There's no other reason for God to show his mercy than his own Son. This becomes very important. So he says, since you have ventured to speak, Lord, suppose 20 are found. I will not destroy on account of 20. Let my Lord not be angry. And I will speak one more time. Suppose 10 are found there. He says, I will not destroy it on account of 10. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he departed, and Abraham returned to his place. So the scene is set. First of all, the promise is secure yet again to both Abraham and Sarah that they're going to have a son that everything that God has been working for the last nearly 21 years now is going to come about. That God is just in what he does, and it is, and knowing what his justice is and his mercy is a part of the blessing that he's bestowed upon us as being his children. We're not left in the dark about it. And that is illustrated by the series of conversation where God says, look, even if there's only 10, I'm willing to overlook all the rest to let these 10 righteous people flourish. Because if I've got 10, God says in this, I can change the world. I can do whatever I want to do with these 10 if they're truly righteous. Okay, now we find out the rest of the story.
Yeah. You have to do like
There's not 10.
And we see that the 2 men have become 2 angels.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. The identification changes. So it's almost like this: when they're with the Lord, we're satisfied with them being mere mortals. But when they're away from the Lord, they all of a sudden, who they are is magnified because they're able to magnify without his presence. Yeah. So, and yeah, even their purpose is understood. Yeah. So the 2 angels entered Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting at Sodom's gateway. All right, who said it? Gateways. The leaders of the town. Okay. So what we have here is this idea that Lot is now one of the judges in the city. At least that's what we're made to believe. We just left the judge of the universe. Okay, now we're dealing with a judge of a corrupt city.
The peons.
So this is the contrasting nature that we're dealing with here as we read through the story. When Lot saw them, he got up to meet them. He bowed with his face to the ground, just like Abraham did to him, and said, "My lords, turn aside to your servant's house, wash your feet, and spend the night. Then you can get up early and go on your way." Okay, hospitality, same thing. But they said no.
Abraham's family, hopefully they were taught well.
Yeah. They said no, we'd rather spend the night in the square. Why would they do that?
They're having to check out the wickedness.
Yeah, they came for a purpose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were to see if everything that they had heard was true. But maybe they have an insight into Lot that maybe we don't want this hospitality.
We'll stay here.
Maybe we need to do what we came to do and get it over with. Okay? I don't know. But it is interesting that they refuse it. But they did. But he urged them so strongly that they followed him and went into his house. So he pled with them. He prayed to them. Please don't stay out here. I know the wickedness of this place. You're not going to last. So he prepared a feast. Here we go again. And baked unleavened bread for them, and they ate it. Unleavened bread. That's kind of a foreshadowing thing here, right? Mm-hmm. They're fixing to have to leave in a hurry. Yeah. The other bread was not unleavened bread. It was the bread of the meal. It was yeast bread.
Yeah. Talking about
Abraham's bread.
He had the time to prepare it.
Yeah.
So do you think they prepared the unleavened bread because Lot knew who they were and he was fixing to have to get out?
Well, I don't think that. I think it's the writer. I think it's the person that's providing the story to us to let us know that in the other episode with Abraham was in a hurry to bring about rest and relaxation and sustenance, fulfillment to his guest. Lot seems to be preparing for, you're going to get in and you're going to get out because this isn't a place for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so everything about Abram's environment says you're welcomed here. This is like home to you. Yeah. You've been made a part of my home, but Lot is saying the opposite. You're going to be here for the night, but you got to get out of here. So unleavened bread ready. It'll travel. It'll go. And of course, we come back to that in Exodus. You know, when the unleavened bread is prepared because there's no time for it to rise. So before they went to bed, the men of Sodom, both young and old, the whole population. So this is all the men of Sodom, surrounded the house. Don't know how they knew these guys were here, but I guess in a town like that, you got your eye out and you're looking and you're watching, and they knew everything that was going on. Yeah, fresh meat. So they called out to Lot and said, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Send them out to us so that we can have sex with them." The word there, of course, is to know, but it's used in that form in the Hebrew that lets us know that that's their intention.
Pretty bad.
Okay. Yeah, so no women come, just the men.
And it was
Why
men.
so desirable?
And there were men. So,
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
like
so
it's
Yeah.
really, it's
Yeah.
really wicked. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not even like they're looking for prostitutes. It's men with men.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That the women aren't interested. The women in the town, they've. I don't think they've got a sensibility about what's right. There's just they just have succumbed to the nature of where they live. It's a corrupt bunch of men there, and this is how they satisfy their own carnal sexual desires.
Yeah.
So Lot went out to them at the entrance and shut the door behind him. So he's outside with these guys, and he says, "Don't do this evil, my brothers." So he acknowledges that it's evil,
And he knows them,
and he's been living in it. See,
and he knows them as brothers.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and why don't you leave? Why are you still there?
there you go. So this is the backstory that the writer is inviting the reader. When Lot left Abraham, his tents were cast on the outside of the city. Remember? Because he likes the fertile ground and he's going to have his herdsmen and all. But the next time we meet Lot, he's got a house inside the city. So he's kind of abandoned everything that he was pursuing when he left Abraham. And it's all taken this terrible twist.
Like almost like he's part of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Like-
yeah.
He's part of them, but he's still separated from them.
Yeah. Well, he's living in his own household because we just go to the next sentence. I mean, what father who was righteous would
Yeah.
do what he's going to do with
Yeah.
his daughters?
So look,
So
I've
he's
got.
So he's
Yeah.
part of their thinking. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
He knows that this might be acceptable to them.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
we're living here, so don't bother my guests. But here we're going to have kids.
So virgin men and virgin daughters, it doesn't matter. He's thinking in his
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me
My
just
daughters
give you-
would be a suitable substitute.
Yeah.
Or so he says, "Look, I've got 2 daughters who haven't been intimate with a man. I'll bring them out to you, and you can do whatever you want to them." So he's got this. I mean, he's seen a lot. He knows the depravity that he's putting his own daughters in, but his sense, and this is what's crazy, his sense of hospitality for these 2 supersedes his care for his own daughters.
Kids.
Because truth is, who knows, they're betrothed or they have men that they're to marry. It doesn't say that they're betrothed in the
But
normal
in their
sense
culture,
of the
it
word.
probably would have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what was that like? We don't really
For that
know.
community.
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole
It's
thing is
wicked, no
is
matter
depraved.
what. We know it was wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the whole place was.
Yeah.
He says, however, don't do anything to these men because they have come under the protection of my roof. So here we have the contrast again. They come to Abram's house and they feast and they have this nice afternoon relaxation, and they provide a promise to Abraham, or not provide, but reassure the promise. And they get here and they have a meal and total chaos erupts.
Hurry up, get out of here. I'll feed you, but I want you to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. He couldn't get them out by in the morning. They were already at his door.
Yeah.
So verse 9, get out of the way, they said. This one came here as an alien, but he is acting like a judge. So when we get introduced to Lot in Sodom, he's sitting at the city gates, and we immediately think, oh, he's a man of stature there. But when we get to this point, it's kind of like he's a poser. He wants to feel like has some authority and
Yeah.
power in this city, but he really doesn't.
He really did.
Yeah. Now, the place where all of this kind of grinds against Scripture is when we go to 2 Peter chapter 2, and Peter calls him a righteous man.
Talking about Lot.
You're talking about Lot. And I want to look that up real quick. So, 2 Peter chapter 2, and I don't remember. I was looking at it earlier. Maybe verse 17, or is there that many?
Mine says a worker. That was their worker. There's some names there. There's Lot.
False prophets and teachers.
Let's see. Oh, here it is. Oh, I'm in the Phillips translation. That's why I'm having trouble finding. Let me change.
Oh, he talks about Sodom and Gomorrah in chapter 2, verse 6.
There you go, verse 6.
If by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what was going to happen to the ungodly. And if he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, then mine kind of parentheses for as
Yep.
that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard.
Yeah. So Peter's painting Lot in the best light possible. That he was a righteous man and he was distressed over the depravity that he was seeing. And the point is, if God could save, I think let's see in verse. For if God didn't spare the angels, and He didn't spare Sodom, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to keep unrighteousness under punishment for the day of judgment. So He's saying He rescued righteous Lot, but He destroyed the sinfulness of Sodom. But we keep finding out, or we read the story and we're thinking, I don't see a lot of righteousness here until I look at Abraham and his relationship and his pleading with God, and I see that Lot is made right under the mercy of God that is pled for by Abraham. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then I can see where Peter gets that.
And I always live on this side of the cross, but you and your household will be saved.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so Abraham is
Yeah.
pleading for Lot.
There you go. That's how I saw it too. I read a lot about that today, and a lot of commentators really couldn't settle on what Peter was trying to do. But I think the whole thing is fulfilled in the promise that God makes to Abraham that, yeah, I'm taking care of your family. I made a promise. And I'm going to keep the promise.
At the beginning, we're going to see His mercy.
Yeah, that's right.
So this is mercy.
Verse 10, but the angels reached out, brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. They struck the men who were at the entrance of the house, both young and old, with blindness, so that they were unable to find the entrance to the house. Okay, that's what he's meaning here. Then the angel said to Lot, do you have anyone else here, a son-in-law, your sons and daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of this place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people is so great before the Lord that the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Okay, so there's no amount of blessing that Abraham is able to spill onto Sodom that is ever going to change things. This kind of the idea that is being stated here. This is an irreversible situation that now they understand and are able to see. So Lot went out and he spoke to his sons-in-laws who were going to marry his daughters. Get up, he said, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy this city. But his sons-in-laws thought he was joking. Now what would have made them think that he was joking? Yeah.
To someone.
Yeah.
And he was about to give them to the man out there.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole thing is, this is crazy.
It couldn't get more dramatic and rated R. If we were
Yeah.
watching a movie,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
or seeing a wild.
I mean, just get this scene. He's scammering around town. Everybody wandering around blind, trying to,
Yeah.
you know, who knows what's going on?
Yeah, the angel has struck.
Yeah.
And so he's running to get them, and they think he's joking. So
So what's that say about the nature of Lot's life in Sodom? Has he lived a godly life? Has he taught the ways of Yahweh? Has he?
They're not taking him serious. So that, yeah.
Yeah.
no. And
So-
if they're part of this place, then
It's no big deal to them. So what?
it's no big deal
Yes.
to them apparently. So
So
they
so
weren't.
what-
They
so
just
what
weren't
Lot-
at the door,
Yeah.
but no telling what else they were doing. You know, and Abraham's trying to save Lot and his family, but in the same sense, God was going to destroy everything.
Right.
And wouldn't he have destroyed it if Abraham had not spoken up, and Lot would have been destroyed too?
Could very well. Yeah. The other thing we have here is earlier it said that all the men, young and old, gathered around the house. Does it include
Those guys.
those future sons-in-law?
Why would they not be in the word all?
That's
All?
right.
Doesn't all,
So
all
either-
always mean all?
Yeah,
Then all-
I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
All is a hyperbole that just saying, oh well, there's just so many of the men, okay, or it is all. And so, but either way,
Yeah,
they hear this news and they say,
it's a
"Phew,
big deal, yeah.
you got to be joking that God's going to destroy the city, or you got to be joking that we would ever think about leaving this place."
Yeah.
Either way, or both, they're not really in tune with anything that God is about, or they would know that Lot's uncle, he worships a God that well, let me just tell you, he took 118 guys and he
And he wiped out
conquered
his
a whole
armies.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I would have been paying attention, but none of this stuff is stuck because, and this is we find this out as we move forward. You can take the family out of Sodom, but it's hard to get Sodom out of the family. And that's what these guys, they were so entrenched. Roy Zuck calls this, they fell in love with the progressive nature of city life. And there was, and that's the great contrast we find here, is that here's Abram, simple agrarian country life, we would call it. You know, he's minding his herds, and he's raising his family, and he's worshiping his God. And then you go down the hill into the city, and all chaos is breaking loose because you kind of lose sight of all that simplicity when you're trying to make you're able to make life into whatever you want it to be. This is where I get modern day ideas
Same
about
thing,
it.
though, that it's just whatever are you more comfortable in your sin? I'm not, and it's funny because I'm not seeing it.
No, I think you're right.
I'm not seeing it country and city. I'm seeing it sinfulness and godly. You know,
Yeah.
You're just so comfortable. I mean, and are we not there? I would rather do my drugs. I would rather have substance. Don't tell me, than to do what
this-
God says.
Yeah.
But when he's saying country and city, he's also talking about he's out here with his family and his people,
Yeah.
and he keeps them up to date, so to speak.
Right.
on
We're
this
down
is how
here,
we're
they're
going to
not.
live.
Yeah.
This is what.
Yeah,
This is who
or-
we're going to worship.
Yeah.
And over there's so much other influence.
Yeah.
They're in amongst other people that don't believe like this whole group of people believe.
And that's where we are today, though. As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. But then,
Yeah.
how many around you, literally around you, aren't? Well, no, I'm not interested in that.
Right.
Yeah.
No. You can
Yeah.
get up and go to church. I mean, that's why I was thrilled that my 4 o'clock in the morning visitors got up and went
Yeah.
to church at 8. I'm like, thank you, God.
Yeah.
So maybe not sitting, it's values driven.
Yes, that.
What are the values that drive? What is the cultural nature? There's identifying principles, and you see Abraham, and it's taken him 20 years to develop these identifying principles with God and this relationship with God. And Abram's been missing a little bit less than half that time, and he's gone the totally opposite direction. And all of that has been influenced by the way that we choose to live life with God. And one of my favorite sayings now, Abraham was living it at 3 miles an hour with God, and they're down here in the fast lane in the city where you do whatever you can to satisfy your own desires, and you have to move at a neck-breaking pace in order for that to happen. You have to stay ahead of the next guy. There's only, as this illustrates, there's a scarcity of life. Even though what they're doing is just depraved in every sense, there's only one opportunity with a virgin. So the whole city, they're depraved. There's a scarcity to this. You get up here with Abram, and there's not a scarcity. There's the impossibility that's going to come true. You don't have a son, but I'm telling you, you're going to have a son. You're going to be a nation. So you see the scarcity at one end and this abundance at the other. And it all is a result of how you relate to God. And that's amazing to me that people can't see that.
They still don't open their eyes.
We still don't see that. And when you look at the changes, the back and forth changes that we make in our country, I thought from Reagan to Obama was fast. But I think we're going to see it all the time now in politics. It's going to be every 4 years, 6 years. We're going to be in these changes, and politics are so connected to culture now that we're going to live in whiplash. The world, our country will, except for those that believe and trust God. They're not.
Yeah.
They're going to be the steady and true.
We may have to walk through this with them. We have to vote. We have to be our part because we're here, quote, in the community. But back to as for me and my house, we're going to walk with God.
Right.
And that's like my Brandy and Tim in Camden just got back from New York. That's where they took her for the senior trip. First senior trip, just the three of them. And they went to one of the plays, I think, and they went to Grand Central Station and, Statue of Liberty. They went everywhere. And I asked her, she was in Grand Central Station, they took some pictures, and I said, don't think you're going to move up there, young lady. I was talking to Brandy on Facebook, and she said, oh no, she said, this little country girl is going to come back to Louisiana. She's coming back. I like the city to visit, but I don't want to live here. So it was enough for them to go. They had a good time.
They saw it.
Yeah. And to experience it, but to live there, she's already showing it's not for me and my family. We're not coming here. This doesn't excite me that much.
Right.
And we live in Denham Springs, and it's a big town, or a big city, but it's not New York.
Yeah.
And so Abraham and his people and Sodom and Gomorrah, they over there be in New York.
Yeah.
And they're over here and living in Denham Springs. There's a lot more people here that feel like you and I do. There's a lot less in New York City that feel that way.
Yeah.
I believe with all my heart.
Well, no, but then there's these great examples of churches that are in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Brooklyn Tabernacle and the
so they have their remnant.
Yes.
Those areas have their remnant.
Yeah. So it's how you choose to live. So we don't want to geographically mark out these camps. It's how we live.
Well, that's like the conventions being held in California. I mean, we're going to take care of business there, but of all states, that state.
In this year. How did God figure that one out?
Yes,
What's He doing?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, verse 15. At daybreak, the angels urged Lot on, get up, take your wife and your daughters who are here, or you will be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he hesitated. We get on to his wife about hesitating, but he hesitated. Because of the Lord's compassion for him, the men grabbed his hand, his wife's hand, in the hands of his two daughters, and they brought him out and left him outside the city. So they got him out the city walls. So out of God's compassion for him. So he doesn't want to leave. See, the tie is strong. Yeah. And God, there's times where God just got to take us by the hand and drag us out. And he does. He says, as soon as the angels got them outside, one of them said, run for your lives.
Yeah.
Okay, they know what's coming. Don't look back and don't stop anywhere on the plain. Run to the mountains or you will be swept away. So now we get the idea of the scope that is about to happen.
big.
There's
Kinda
several
like
cities on the plain.
Of nuclear bombs fixing
Yeah.
to go.
Oh, well, I read an article in January. I forget. It wasn't a religious publication. I forget who it was now. But they finally have determined that something like a meteor hit that area at that time.
Because they're looking at the earth even all these thousands of years later, and they know that because that's what they taught us in Israel. When God touches around here, you know it's Him.
Well, yeah, they were able to do this deep earth
Yeah.
X-ray thing, and able to determine the circumference,
And what it would be.
and it would have taken in this exact area and not any further. It was the
And
right
then-
size
and
in the
then-
right place.
And no
And
wonder
then
she
for-
turned into salt.
Well,
I
for
mean, they
people
tell
to
you
be told not to
look
look
at
to
that
look
kind of
back, so
Yeah.
you know when she looked back, it was something so fierce.
Yeah.
The looking back, like you said, probably went into her eyes and her whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he's saying just let it hit the back of you, you know,
Yeah,
just let it
keep
be
running
running.
and keep
Yeah.
running. Don't even stop on the plane.
Yeah.
He told them.
Yeah.
Don't even stop. He told them to get to the
Yeah.
hills. You know, so they knew it was going to be powerful.
So look at verse 18. But Lot said to them, no, my lords, please. He doesn't want to go to the hills. Your servant has indeed found favor with you. And he could put in parentheses, but I don't know why. And you have shown me great kindness by saving my life, and I don't know why. But I can't run to the mountains. The disaster will overtake me, and I will die. So there's two lines of thought here. Either he just wanted to remain in a city, and he has to go to Zor, or he really believes that the hills are too far away, and that he can't be protected by these two men that have told him to do this. Either way,
His heart's in the city.
his heart's in the city, and it's certainly not believing that these two guys are going to take care of him, even though they've basically come and drug him out of there. So he said, look, this town is close enough for me to flee to. It's a small place. Let me run to it. It's only a small place, isn't it? So that I can survive. So he's got it in his head. The reason why God is angry about this is to the vast sinfulness that is going on. And it doesn't ever say that this little town is full of sin, but that's what's going on in Lot's mind. It's a little place. You know, you'll hardly know it's there. You hardly know I'm there. I want to go hide, is what it is. So now surviving is hiding. But he wants to hide in a city. He wants to hide in his own comfort. And when God shows up and says things are changing, and you want to be on the right side, just to go ahead and do what he's saying, right? Because ultimately, that's what happens.
Yeah, if they said go to the hills, escape with your life, he's wanting to go somewhere else.
He
And
says,
I'm like,
let me stop over here.
what are you
Yeah.
doing? You know, run,
Yeah.
dude. These guys just told you to run. They're fixing to destroy this whole city. And you don't, it's like, you know, well, let me think about it.
Yeah.
No, I'd be running, but he just like is so intertwined with this city life, he just can't get away from it.
Right. And there's a thing about this that kind of says to us, okay, God's made up his mind. Lot's going to be saved. It doesn't matter if it's here or there. He's not going to change his mind about saving Lot because he wants to go to a city. Okay, so I'm just going to let him go to a city. But from Lot's point of view, this is just another way of doing what you want. That's going to satisfy you in some sense. May not be what's best for you, but doggone it, it's what I want. Sound like a little kid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So that's what we're dealing with here. So he says, all right, I'll grant you your request about this matter too, and will not demolish the town you mentioned. Hurry up, run to it, for I cannot do anything until you get there. So the whole program's on hold till
Yeah.
Lot gets himself satisfied. And they named the city Zor. Zor, I don't remember what Zor means.
How does that? When we see these names in the Old Testament, all I think about is the Zor Baptist Church.
I know.
Church.
It's only Zor. It's only Zor I know.
It means little.
Yeah, it sure does. Lowly, little.
Little Baptist Church.
So the little town.
Lowly Baptist Church.
All right. So the sun had risen over the land when Lot reached Zor. Okay, so all this has happened at night. And the sun is finally up. Then out of the sky the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah burning fire from the Lord. Okay. So here is it's a righteous sentence and execution. We know that because Abraham went through a painful dialogue to make sure that he understood the righteousness of God, and God was going to exercise his righteousness if he found only 10 people, but he didn't. And at this point, Abraham, it says later, was looking and he saw. He doesn't know what happened to Lot. He demolished these cities, the entire plain, all the inhabitants of the city, and whatever grew around them.
So it was a bad meteor.
Bad meteor.
It was a nuclear bomb.
Yeah, yeah.
It's God's nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
What anything we made, it was something he made, so it's probably far worse.
But Lot's wife looked back and became a pillar of salt. So that idea of salt has a lot of different meanings in Scripture, to flavor, to preserve, to do these. But it was also an item of corruption. And so she looked back at her at the sin of the city, obviously what her heart yearned for, and the yearning of her corruption takes over. And she literally becomes a pillar of her own corruption. Early in the morning, Abraham went to the place where he had stood before the Lord, so where they were looking out over Sodom. He looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and all the land of the plain, and he saw that smoke was going up from the land like the smoke of a furnace. So it was when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham and brought Lot out of the middle of the upheaval when he demolished the cities where Lot had lived. So why is Lot brought out?
Because of Abraham.
Because of Abraham.
I remembered Abraham.
Yeah. So, man, we never give up on those in our life that are resisting the righteousness of God. Yeah, who's your one? Yeah. My granny, every time you go see her, at 105, but every time you went to see her, she would talk about situations with family, or the world. We must pray, Mark. We must pray. And she grabbed your hand.
Let's pray now.
Yeah. And she prayed. And I always wondered, when she passed, I kind of made a joke when I was doing her eulogy. Granny, I sure hope you're still praying for me.
Yeah.
I need every one of those I can get. So Abraham, in his righteousness with God, had a deep concern for his nephew and wanted him to be right. Is there even 10? And, there wasn't. There wasn't 10. But God made it right for Lot because of Abraham. We know that Abraham wasn't a righteous person, but was made righteous because of the righteousness of Abraham. And we're made righteous because of the righteousness of Christ. So we can't beat up on Lot too badly, because we would be just like him. Now the last part of this, we'll just go over very quickly. Lot departed from Zor to live in the mountains.
After all that, he didn't want to live in Zor anyway.
Yeah. And why does he not want to live in Zor? Because he's afraid to live there. Why is he afraid to live there? I can only imagine that it's a lot like Sodom and Gomorrah.
He probably got there and figured out.
And he saw it was no different than what I've left.
I just
Or
can't.
I see the handwriting on the wall. It's going to be as bad, and God may come do this here.
God
That's right.
said, go up to the hills.
And I
he just
did,
had to go to Zor.
Yeah.
So, you know, God always knows the best, but we think He don't.
Yeah. Now, we find in this next thing, all right, so his daughters are there with him. That's all he's got left. Okay? And they lived in this cave. Now, when you find a cave in the Old Testament, it's never good.
No.
It's rarely good, I should say.
It is just a rock over there.
Yeah.
We're not talking about some cool, beautiful cave like we can go down into the sea and see all
Yeah, no.
No.
It's an indention into the side.
No.
Yeah, so there they are. And then the firstborn of the daughters said, "Our father is old, and there's no man for us to sleep with us, as is the custom of all the land." So the custom is we're to bear children. They just left a place. We had no interest in bearing children. They just wanted sex with men. But they understand that this is the custom of their land. So they are obeying the laws of custom, which has been there isn't the law yet, so we don't really know that this would be
against it.
Yeah. But what we do know is every time someone tries to fix their problem, when it comes to having children, they mess it up. If it's not done the way God says, it's always a mess. And this is one of those places. Now, when we saw Ishmael, well, Hagar in the desert, and she's run away, and she's there to die. And where is she when that's happening? She's by a spring. And whenever you find a spring in the Old Testament, you can look for life to come. Yeah. So in that story, we have the spring, and there's the birth that comes out of that. It's all the symbolism comes together in the Hebrew text to show that this is a God ordained situation. But here, there's no water anywhere. This is not a God ordained that thing that's come about. So they said, "Come, let's get our father drunk. We get him to drink wine, so that we can sleep with him."
We're not sexual, but we're going to also be drunk while we're talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is their reason to preserve our father's line. Okay, so they have had no understanding of what's going on. Lot has shared nothing with them about what God is doing with their uncle. Or their great uncle Abraham.
They wouldn't have wanted to do that. They were just
the law. So it's more evidence that Lot had really slipped away from all of that.
I mean, he didn't even go back. He could have left Sodom and Gomorrah. He went to Zoar, but just a little ways around, he could have gone on to being with Abraham. But he didn't do that.
Yeah, no, he's just fearful. He's living in fear now.
Yeah.
His whole life is in fear.
He didn't want to go back and tell Abraham, "Look, I made a mess of stuff."
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then he's in fear, and he brings along his two daughters, and they wind up being who he should be the most fearful of, because out of this incestual plan that they cooked up becomes two sons that are wreak havoc on the Israelites for the rest of their. Yeah. So they do it again the next day to preserve the father's line. So they get him drunk and they sleep with him again. And then it says both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The first gave birth to a son, and his name was Moab, the Moabites. The younger also gave birth to a son, and she named him Ben-Ami, and he's the father of the Ammonites today. So when you get into the history, so that's all you read about, the Moabites and the Ammonites. They were constant.
Moab means from father, and Ben-Ami means son of my people.
Yeah.
So they too bad.
So poor old, they're raised up, and that's what Lot has to hear every day when he's calling his grandsons. Yeah. "Oh, you're my son."
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Yeah.
It's like that old song they used to sing at the Chuck Wagon, "I'm my own grandpa."
Yeah.
The old Chuck Wagon shows.
Yeah, crazy about everybody's marrying him.
Yeah.
I'm my own grandpa.
So anyway, we got through those two chapters, and we did it in an hour. Really, really fascinating story, because we see the intimacy that God has formed with Abraham and what it has meant for Lot. and then we just see the total brokenness of Lot, and how the intimacy that Abraham enjoys has rescued Lot. But then out of that rescue, really Sodom and Gomorrah is reborn again. Because of these two children that are born out of this incestuous.
Never got that out of them. You got them out of it, but you never got that out of them.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that's
just when you think that the story can take a good turn,
It's
it
still
always takes another turn.
Yes.
And we're fixing to get into the whole thing where Sarah's rescued from Abimelech because Abraham makes a mistake with her again. It's like we never reach that point in the story where everything just has the happy ending, but Abraham's declared to be a friend of God.
Yeah.
And I think we see that fully in this particular episode. Anyway,
I have
adios,
had this
muchachos.
money forever. Somebody, I think it was Miss
Is
Helen.
it book money?
No,